Congratulations! You've now made it to the last video of the last section of the Gambling Manager seminar. In this section, we're going to talk about specific internal control procedures that are required by either statute or rule. Of course, there will be lots of other internal controls that you'll want to implement for yourselves to handle certain situations, but these are the ones that are required by law. The first one is you have to have a separate gambling checking account. It has to be at a bank, a savings and loan, or a credit union located in Minnesota. Each check from that separate checking account has to have the signature of 2 active members of your organization. Now, if you recall, an active member is someone who has paid all membership dues and has equal voting rights among all for all gambling activities. So 2 of those people have to sign checks. Most organizations have multiple people, maybe 3 or even 4 people that are eligible to sign checks, so that if one's on vacation or feeling well or away, that they can still get 2 signatures that you'll need in order to get your checks signed. The treasurer may not sign checks. The treasurer accounts for the non-gambling funds of the organization. A person who accounts for the non-gambling funds of your organization cannot also account for the gambling funds. The only exception to that is we do allow the CEO to sign gambling account checks and general account checks. No pre-signing checks. That defeats the whole purpose. And you'll be surprised how many times we'll get to do a compliance review and we'll ask to see the checkbook, and there will be 3 or 4 checks in there signed by the CEO without any payee, without any amount, without any date, totally giving complete control to the gambling manager to write that check out for $10,000 worth of tickets to Europe, plane tickets to Europe, or whatever they wanted to write it out for. That check would go through. So don't do that. The whole point of having 2 signatures on a check is to make sure that 2 people are aware of what funds are being spent on the gambling account. Expenditures from the gambling account may be made by electronic transfer or by debit card, and these things are relatively new to be allowed by a gambling operation, but you can have a gambling account debit card. It's getting to be that so many places don't take checks anymore. So we allow you to have a debit card and make payments by electronic transfer. Or you can, if you have bill pay or that sort of thing set up on your account where you can pay electronically, that's also fine. But in those cases, you still have to have 2 active members authorize each expenditure. And the way that you document that, you have 2 members authorize the expenditure, is at the end of the month, take out the bank statement that will list all of your electronic transfers and have 2 active members go through that to make sure each one of those is authorized. If you see something on there to Dave's Travel Agency, well, then maybe that's going to be one that you're going to question and wonder what the heck's going on. But if you go through there and see that they're for rent or for compensation or to buy something from Office Max that you might need, then you'll be able to identify each of those, make sure they're authorized, and then we want each of the 2 members to sign and date that bank statement. And then that'll show that you've gone through it and made sure that those are okay. And that's who we'll hold accountable for those expenditures as well. And you want to make all expenditures directly from the gambling account. You don't want to have a member say, I want to donate $500 to the Boy Scouts, make the check out to me, Jim Jackson, and I'll take I'll write another check or pay them with cash, the Boy Scouts with cash. That raises a red flag right away, hopefully in your mind that there might be something up with it. But the law says you do have to pay all expenditures directly from the gambling account. Don't go through a third party. Startup loans. If you're a brand new organization, you're going to need a startup loan because you're going to have expenses that were paid prior to making any income. And that'll be things like your application fees, starting cash bank, compensation, supplies, and so on. You cannot do a startup loan to add a new site for an existing licensed organization. It's just when you first get started in the first few months until you get start having some income coming in. Then once you have the startup loan deposited into your gambling account, a lot of organizations say now it takes between around $5,000 just to get started. And so let's say you did $5,000, deposit that into your gambling account. Once you have $5,000 more in your gambling account that you can repay the loan with, then you have to apply to the Gambling Control Board to get approval to repay it. So there's no deadline on when you do that, but we expect that you'll apply to repay that as soon as you're able to, as soon as you have sufficient funds in your gambling account to do so. Deposit deadlines. When you have proceeds from a game, you can't just hold on to that money forever and say, well, that was money we made in 2018. It's still in my pocket because we haven't deposited yet. No, that's temporary theft. So we have deposit deadlines in law. Then one of the laws is that you have to deposit gambling income within 4 business days of removing the game from play, the date of the bingo occasion, or the date of the raffle drawing. So 4 business days. If today is a Thursday, 4 business days would be Friday would be 1 day, then Saturday and Sunday wouldn't count. Monday would be 2 days, Tuesday 3, and Wednesday 4. So if you close the game on a Thursday, you'd have to deposit that money by the following Wednesday. Electronic game proceeds is a little bit different. They must be deposited within 4 business days after the total net receipts reaches $2,000. So you start off the month, if you make $2,000 of net receipts in the first night, then you'll have 4 business days to deposit that. If you don't make $2,000 until the 18th of the month, then you have to deposit it within 4 business days of the 18th. And you also, regardless of reaching $2,000, every month you're going to have to make a deposit of the previous month's receipts that haven't been deposited. You'll have to deposit that money within 4 business days of the first day of the next month. So maybe you made a deposit on July 22nd, and now you have just $500 in the bank at the end of July, on July 31. Well, you still have to deposit that small amount, even though it's not $2,000. You have to make a deposit of that money within 4 business days of that next month, into August. On the deposit slips, we want you to itemize the amounts deposited on your deposit slip. So you're going to record the game name, serial number, site played, the bingo occasion dates, and so on. Whatever the source of that deposit is, they'll be itemized on your deposit slip. Do not deposit non-gambling funds into your gambling account unless it's for reimbursements, such as a reimbursement of your gambling account for excess cash shortages or for disallowed expenditures. Startup loans, that's non-gambling funds. You can deposit into your gambling account. And then there's something called an emergency loan, and you can deposit that money into your gambling account. An emergency loan is just if you don't have enough money in your gambling account to pay your bills. If something goes wrong and all of a sudden you don't have enough cash to pay your compensation or pay your rent, then you can do something that's called an emergency loan from your general fund and deposit that in your gambling account. If you do that, if you're in that situation, please call your compliance specialist right away. There are kind of some specific procedures to follow there, and we want to make sure that you handle that correctly. So call one of your or email one of your compliance specialists and make sure you're doing that correctly. Then we want you to audit your deposits monthly. And that, by audit, we mean that you're going to match the amounts on your deposit slips to the bank statement and to your report of games played during the month. So you're going to have your deposit slips where you have all this information on there. And it's very easy to fill out a deposit slip, but the next step is to make sure that you take the money and actually deposit it in the bank. And we've had situations like that. The deposit book looks fine. Everything looks like, oh yeah, they deposited this, deposited that, all detailed. But then we look at the bank statement, and well, the deposit slip was filled out, but it was never actually deposited. So what we want to do is make sure that the bank statement shows all of those deposits, and that those deposits match up with how much money you're supposed to have according to your report of games on your Schedule B2s and your LG100As. The lessor is restricted from doing certain things. The lessor is the owner of a site where you're doing gambling, conducting gambling. And the main one is that the lessor may not manage lawful gambling. It's your gambling operation. And sometimes we have lessors that they think it's their gambling operation, and they're just kind of letting you in there just to as a favor. And maybe in some ways it is a favor, but the point is that it's not the lessor who gets to decide what games to play. It's not the lessor who gets to decide who's working in the pull tab booth that night. The lessor doesn't get to say, we're going to make $1,000 donation to my son's hockey team. It doesn't work that way. So make sure that the lessor isn't the one managing gambling at the site. Your gambling manager is the one managing gambling at that site. And if you have any problems with the lessor, please let your compliance specialist know. This is one of our challenges, just to make sure that the organization stay in control. And why is that so important? Because we don't have any regulatory authority over the lessor. If the lessor messes up on a game and posts a game inaccurately, or starts paying out prizes way more than what they should, well, the lessor is just going to say, well, that's not my problem. You guys, your organization has the license. So since you're the one who's responsible, make sure you are the one who's actually doing those functions. Don't let your lessor push you around. You'll have to work together with them, certainly, keep each other happy, certainly, but again, it's your organization who has the license, and you're the one who's going to be in the newspaper if something goes wrong. And the lessor has to allow reasonable access to the premises during business hours. And we, believe it or not, we've had cases where the bar owner gets in a fight with the gambling manager and tells the gambling manager, you're banned from our site. You can't come in here. We'll give the money to somebody else in your organization, and then that person can deposit it, but the gambling manager is not allowed in here. Well, that's just completely unacceptable, and we got that situation corrected right away. Let's talk a little about cash shortages. Cash shortages can indicate theft. Now, some cash shortages are inevitable. Anyone who works at a Target or at Burger King or wherever, the hardware store, they're all going to have some cash shortages, because you're going to make some mistakes, and usually if the mistake is in the customer's favor, you're less likely to hear about it than if it's in your business's favor. So even though there are mistakes both ways, they're going to show up as a little more on the cash shortage side. But cash shortages they're acceptable. We have no choice but to accept them. But if cash shortages are high, then that's often a skimming situation. And even especially when we see patterns or situations where we've had sites or booth sellers that were always off $20 after every shift, those sorts of situations show that there's skimming going on. It's not just bad math or sticky dollar bills or something like that. And the ways to prevent cash shortages, the main thing is to spot check games in play and let your sellers know that you are there and holding them accountable. So I've had gambling managers tell me that he just went into his sites when he had cash shortages. He just went in there and he picked up asked the seller to step aside. He picked up some prize receipts and he counted the cash and did a little checking on this and that with the reports and so on. And then he said, okay, thank you. And he wasn't actually taking the time to audit anything. He just was poking around a little bit, and that presence, his presence there, kept his sellers from um, being careless. And they knew that he was watching. They didn't know they didn't know that it was sort of a pretend watching, but they did better. But if things continue on that way with cash shortages, then you might have to just say, okay, step aside. I'm gonna audit these games that are in play. We're gonna count and see how much money is supposed to be in the cash drawer. We're gonna verify, match that up, and to see if your shift is long or short. And when you do that, then you're very likely to not have any cash shortages. And do things like verify the posting, review the prize receipts, review the closed games, review the tracking forms. Do those things and pay attention. If they know you're paying attention, you're not going to have the problems. And if you do have the problems, even though you're doing all these things, then it's time for that seller to go. Okay. Too often, I have heard gambling managers say, "Well, Jim, he's really a good seller, really a good pull tab seller, but he's not very good with math, so he makes a lot of mistakes." Well, you can't be a good pull tab seller and have problems with math. Uh, that's the essential part of being a pull tab seller. So if you have good people, do what you can to keep them. If you don't have such good people, it's best to let them go and try to find better ones. Now, there's a difference between fund losses and cash shortages. A fund loss is missing cash or inventory by questionable means. Sometimes cash shortages, when there's a pattern or when they're especially large, that can be a fund loss, but not all cash shortages are fund losses. A cash shortage is the difference between net receipts and the actual cash in hand for a game deposit. So, like we said, we expect there to be some minor cash shortages, almost always. Some people are better than others, but people are going to make some small mistakes. But if a fund loss would be like if somebody broke into the site. If you see the pull tab jars open and a bunch of tickets missing, or the safe has been broken into or stolen, that's a fund loss. And there's a specific procedure for how you need to deal with fund losses. The first thing is you have to notify law enforcement within 5 days. So once you notice that you've had a fund loss, call the police within 5 days. If it's from a dispensing device, you'll notice that right away because there will be damage to the machine for them to get the tickets or the cash out. So you'll notice that right away, and you call the police right away within 24 hours. Then, once you've done that, within 60 days, you will either submit a Form LG-250 to the Gambling Control Board, or you'll reimburse your gambling account for the amount of the loss and send the proof to the Gambling Control Board. Now, the LG-250 is a form where you are able to adjust your profit carryover to account for the fund loss. So you'll know that if you report your game that it had $500 profit and somebody came and stole that $500, now you're going to have a discrepancy on your monthly reports. And the Gambling Control Board will say, well, you did everything. You put the money in a safe. You did everything you're supposed to do, but somebody legitimately broke into your safe and stole that $500. So we'll grant you an adjustment. But if it's something like, I remember one where the bar owner was just one person in some little bar up north, and he was making hamburger and French fries for a customer who came in, and he went in the back room and he was going at it making this hamburger, and when he came back out, the pull tab money was gone from both drawers because he wasn't even in the bar area to watch. And the Gambling Control Board said, well, that isn't a legitimate fund loss. I mean, that's just sheer carelessness to just leave the cash sitting around and make it that easy to steal. So in that situation, the organization had to reimburse its gambling account for the amount of the missing money. In that case, though, the organization then was able to get it out of that bar owner who was almost, pretty embarrassed about letting this happen. So the bar owner paid that money back to the organization. Maybe he got insurance for it or something, I don't know. But the organization ended up being whole. The last thing I want to talk about is regulatory oversight. And this is essentially just a description of what we do in the Gambling Control Board to make sure that you guys are doing all right running your gambling operations. We have an education side. We take this very seriously. We know that people aren't going to obey laws that they don't know about. So we have to, first of all, make sure that organizations, gambling managers, sellers, everybody, that they understand what they're supposed to do. And in Minnesota, especially, once people know what they're supposed to do, they're very likely to be compliant, to do it how they're supposed to. And the way we do this education, we have assigned specialists by county. And I've talked about this, call your compliance specialist. Well, there's, for every county in the state, we have a person that's a compliance specialist assigned to that county and a licensing specialist. And that helps with education because then that person is aware of your situation and it makes things go a lot faster than if you had to explain your whole operation to a new person every time. We have continuing education classes. Right now, those classes are all online classes, but we hope to start doing in-person classes as soon as we safely can. Gaming News is our agency's newsletter. It comes out 4 times a year, and what people look at first, almost always in the Gaming News, there's always a listing of organizations that receive citations or had some other sort of sanctions. So people open it up and they go to the back part and see if any of their local organizations got in trouble for anything. That's, I guess, just human nature that they do that. But there's also information there about classes. The director always puts an article in there about important information that organizations need to know. So it's a good thing to look through, and that's available on our website and sent to Gambling Manager's email. The Lawful Gambling Manual, that's essential reading. If you're going to be a gambling manager, you need to read that manual. And then once you read it, before you get started, you probably have to conduct gambling for a month or so and then go back and read it again to make sure that you're doing it correctly. You're not going to learn everything all at once. It's going to take some effort to do this, but it's a big job. Some organizations are managing tens of millions of dollars. So to think that it's going to be a situation where you can just kind of skim things over and sort of do things half-heartedly, well, that's not fair to your organization. It takes some effort to do it right, but if you do it right, you should be able to make some money for your programs, and that's really what it's all about. We do a mentoring program. Mentoring just means that you can contact your compliance specialist, and if needed, your compliance specialist can come out to your site to explain something or go over how to do certain procedures. Right now, with this COVID-19, I don't think we're able to send anybody out right now. Our person-to-person stuff is pretty limited according to the state regulations, but that'll change sometime and we can get back to doing more of the mentoring. And then I would say the most important resource right now is our gambling managers, or lawful gambling is our website, the Gambling Control Board's website. This is a web address. We take it very seriously to keep this updated with current information, information that you'll need to run your operation. So please keep a close eye on that website. There's a part of on there that says it's current news, and so click on that and you should have all of the most recent news available to you. When we monitor compliance, we do site inspections. That's where we visit your site and make sure everything looks good there. We do compliance reviews. That's where we request your records to look at, and we match things up to make sure that there isn't any money missing or any fraud. You'll send us your financial reports. We use those financial reports for statistical purposes, but also we use them to find red flags. We call red flags that when certain numbers pop out that are unusual or don't match up, then we can get an idea that that your organization is more likely to be having some problems, and we can check on it further. Allegations. Lots of people call in with allegations. These are truly allegations. They're not things that we know that you've done something wrong. It's just that somebody has claimed that you're doing something improper, and so don't take it that we're being accusing you or your organization of something when you get an allegation. We accept anonymous allegations just so that we can keep better tabs on what's going on, but we don't take them as fact until we verify, and that you'll get a letter saying someone alleged this or that. Then you'll be able to respond back to us and say, yeah, but here's what really happened, and describe your side of the story, and then we kind of work on it from there. Our agency works closely with the Department of Public Safety and local law enforcement on cases involving criminal activity. A lot of times local law enforcement will call us in just to provide some technical expertise on how gambling is conducted, so that they can do a better job of their local enforcement. These red flags I was talking about, late filing of monthly reports. Organizations that file late are more likely to have problems. As simple as that. So get your reports in on time, and you'll avoid the first red flag. Late deposits, another one. Why? Because late deposits are often temporary theft, and temporary theft is how nearly all of gambling theft starts. Somebody starts off and they're short on money, so they just take the deposit for a couple of games and they stick that in their pocket for a few days, and then when they get paid or get a loan from their brother or whatever the situation might be, then they put it back in the gambling, and no one's the wiser, except there was a late deposit. But a lot of times they're not able to pay it back, and these deposits get later, and then they'll take current deposits to pay back the old deposits, and it just mushrooms out of shape. So late deposits we take very seriously. Cash shortages we talked about, and we also talked about unwillingness to share information with members. That's a red flag. Sloppy or incomplete records. This, so often we hear that so-and-so gambling manager is a good gambling manager, but he or she is just sloppy. They don't keep very good records. That's another one of those things that just don't, that you can't be a good gambling manager and not keep good records. That's an essential part of the job. Many times the records are sloppy or incomplete because the gambling manager doesn't want to put down or document how much he or she is stealing. So when we see incomplete records, that's definitely an indicator of possible theft. Profit carryover variances, that's another indicator of problems. A lot of times it's just reporting problems, but other times it is actual theft. And then inaccurate amounts on monthly reports. For sanctions, the Gambling Control Board has several options. The board can issue a citation of up to $1,000, or you can get referred to something called the Compliance Review Group, or the CRG. And if you're being referred to the CRG, it's never good news for the organization. The Compliance Review Group is just a committee of the Gambling Control Board that deals with sanctions. And the sanctions could be a fine. Fines could be well over $1,000, suspension of the license, revocation of the license. And what the Compliance Review Group does, it gets done, goes through all of the violations that you've had and discusses each of those with you at this meeting. Then the Compliance Review Group proposes a consent order, meaning that the board says, well, based on this information, it seems like your organization, a fair sanction would be a $1,500 fine and suspension of your license for 30 days. And it asks the organization to consent to that, to agree to those sanctions. And if the organization does, then they fill out this consent order, and that's what happens. But if the organization says no, that isn't, that $1,500, we can't pay that, that isn't fair, then they can appeal the decision to the full board. That happens every once in a while, but usually organizations, they say by the time they're done with CRG, they say, yeah, we admit this was a problem, and then that those sanctions are fair, and everyone signs off on it, and they move on from there. This is the end of our internal controls video. So return to the course and answer a few more questions. After that, you're done except for the test. So thank you for participating, and good luck on that test.